around 3 million years ago in the Paleolithic Era. The earliest members of the human family were already walking across the African continent. Homo habilis, appearing roughly 2.4 million years ago, was the first species to craft stone tools, chipping rocks into sharp-edged instruments used for cutting meat and processing plant material. After Homo habilis, Homo erectus emerged around 1.9 million years ago, becoming the first hominid to leave Africa entirely and spread into Europe and Asia. Homo erectus controlled fire, built rudimentary shelters, and hunted large animals using wooden spears. Around 400,000 years ago, the Neanderthals appeared across Europe and Western Asia, tools from bone, burying their dead, and wearing animal hides against the cold. Then came Homo sapiens, appearing roughly 300,000 years ago in Africa, and eventually replacing every other human species on Earth. The Paleolithic gave way to the Mesolithic around 10,000 BCE, when some groups began settling near rivers and lakes, developing bows and refined fishing tools. The Neolithic followed, during which agriculture was discovered, cattle were domesticated, and the first permanent villages appeared. Pottery, weaving, and the wheel were all inventions of this period. The Stone Age as a whole represents roughly 99% of all human history, ending only when copper smelting was discovered, and the Bronze Age began around 3300 BCE. Bronze, made by combining copper with arsenic or tin, was harder and more durable than anything before it, enabling the production of swords, helmets, agricultural tools like sickles. Population grew, cities expanded, and great monuments rose across Mesopotamia and Egypt. Writing first appeared in Sumer around 3200 BCE. Trade routes began connecting distant civilizations for the first time. The Bronze Age collapsed suddenly around 1200 BCE, and many major civilizations vanished within decades of one another. Volcanic eruptions, drought, invasion by the so-called Sea Peoples, widespread disease have all been proposed as contributing factors. The Iron Age followed, during which iron ore, far more abundant than copper or tin, was smelted into tools and weapons that could be mass-produced. Coins became a standard currency, and the Silk Road trade route connected China to the Mediterranean world. Classical antiquity then began with the Archaic period, during which the Greeks and Romans laid the foundations of Western civilization. Greek philosophers, including Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, developed the moral and intellectual frameworks that shaped centuries of thought. The first experiments with democratic governance took place in Athens around 508 BCE. Hippocrates established the beginnings of medicine. Herodotus, considered the father of history in the Western world, recorded the first known historical works. Alexander the Great, between 336 and 323 BCE, conquered a vast empire stretching from Greece to northwestern India. Rome rose and eventually became the dominant power across the Mediterranean basin, producing leaders like Julius Caesar and Augustus. The Han Dynasty in China ruled simultaneously, producing innovations in papermaking, iron casting, and long-distance trade. The Western Roman Empire's collapse in 476 CE brought classical antiquity to a close, an event that reshaped the political and cultural geography of the entire European continent. The Middle Ages that followed are divided into three phases. The early Middle Ages, sometimes called the Dark Ages, were characterized by political fragmentation, economic decline, a drastic reduction in written records across Western Europe. During this same period, Islam emerged on the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century CE and expanded rapidly across North Africa, Persia, and into Spain. The High Middle Ages saw the rise of feudalism across Europe, the militarization of the Catholic Church, the launch of the Crusades following the Great Schism of 1054 between the Roman and Eastern Orthodox churches. Gothic architecture rose across France and England, and universities began appearing in Bologna, Paris, and Oxford. The late Middle Ages brought severe hardship, beginning with the Little Sea Age and the Great Famine of the early 14th century, followed by the Black Death between 1347 and 1351. That killed roughly 1/3 of Europe's population. Despite these catastrophes, the printing press was invented by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440, enabling the mass production of books and accelerating the spread of ideas. The modern age then began with the Renaissance, originating in Italy and producing figures including Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Galileo Galilei. The Protestant Reformation followed when Martin Luther published his 95 Theses in 1517, fracturing the unified authority of the Catholic Church. The scientific revolution then reshaped humanity's understanding of the natural world, with Isaac Newton formalizing the laws of motion and gravity in 1687. The Age of Enlightenment emphasized reason, individual rights, the separation of church and state, directly inspiring the American Revolution of 1776 and the French Revolution of 1789. The Age of Discovery, running roughly from the 15th through 17th centuries, brought European explorers including Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama into contact with the Americas, Sub-Saharan Africa, South and Southeast Asia, leading to widespread colonization and the transatlantic slave trade. The First Industrial Revolution, beginning in Britain around 1760, transformed manufacturing through steam power and mechanized textile production, driving mass urbanization across England and eventually Europe. A second industrial revolution followed in the late 19th century, introducing telegraphs, railroads, electrical power, the internal combustion engine. In 1914, the First World War began in Europe, drawing in colonial empires from across the globe and killing roughly 20 million people, or the Armistice of 1918. The Spanish flu pandemic then swept the world between 1918 and 1920, killing an estimated 50 to 100 million people. The Great Depression of the 1930s destabilized economies worldwide, contributing to the political conditions that produced the Second World War. That lasted from 1939 to 1945 and resulted in approximately 70 to 85 million deaths, including the Holocaust and the first use of nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. The post-war period saw the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, the decolonization of Africa and Asia. The Space Age, beginning with the Soviet launch of Sputnik in 1957 and culminating in the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a unipolar world order centered on the United States. The Information Age, which accelerated through the 1990s with the commercialization of the Internet, connected billions of people across the planet and transformed commerce, communication, politics in ways that had no clear historical precedent. Smartphones became ubiquitous through the 2000s. Social media platforms reshaped how information spread, elections were contested, and cultures interacted. Artificial intelligence, which had been a field of academic research since the 1950s, began producing practical applications at scale in the 2000s, with machine learning systems demonstrating capabilities in image recognition, language translation, and medical diagnosis. By the early 2020s, large language models trained on vast data sets were generating text, code, images indistinguishable in man, and due respects from human output, drawing widespread public attention and prompting debate about the future of labor, creativity, and governance. By 2025, AI systems were being integrated into healthcare, legal services, scientific research, military applications at a pace that outstripped existing regulatory frameworks in most countries. Looking toward 2050, researchers and institutions project that artificial general intelligence, Systems capable of performing any intellectual task that a human can may become achievable, raising questions about human agency, economic structure, and the relationship between machine and biological intelligence that no human over the past 3 million years has ever been required to answer.